I think I have seen a lot of young managers struggle with hiring people. They hire clones. They want people exactly like them. I look for, not just what that candidate brings technically, but what is his attitude? What is he going to, it's not just about a culture fit, it's also about a culture add. What does he bring into the company, which I don't have? So young managers need to be a little bit more bold in terms of hiring people of their own caliber or even better.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of The Angry Coach. Today, I have with me Mr. Viswanath PS. He is the CEO and Managing Director at Randstad India, popularly known as Vishy. Vishy comes to us as a CEO in Randstad. Before this, he's been a CFO in this organization. Prior to that, she's had a fantastic career, starting off as a young CA, moving all the way to a business leader and a CEO of this organization. Might I add, Vishy is also a runner and an avid fitness activist. So with this, let me pause and welcome Vishy onto this podcast. Welcome, Vishy.
Thank you, Vivek. It's my pleasure to be talking to you today.
It's my pleasure to have you on this show with us. Vishy, as I get started, my first question and thought to you, what makes you angry?
Well, I think it's something. Anger is not something which I'm accustomed to, and people look at. My strength is. People tell that I have a lot of patience. If you were to look at anger, it's an emotional state that varies in intensity from mild irritation to intense fury and rage. And we are all humans, so there is always going to be sometimes those irritations or frustrations or disappointment that happen. So if I were to really call out what makes me angry, I think it's about when there is an expectation set and that's not met. Or it could be an instance where I make a promise of action to my client and I don't follow up on that. And most often, the one that really causes anger to me is when there is a knowing doing gap. Especially in organizations, what's causing the problem and what needs to be done to fix it. But if you don't make that attempt to fix it, then the problem remains. So that's what triggers me the most.
So what I've gathered from this is you're extremely patient and you've got very high patience levels within you. And second, the knowing doing gap. And more importantly, while we might have the skill, but not doing what is required to keep a client promise is something that makes you angry. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely right. Because, I think we believe in extreme customer centricity. And, in a service business, you're always going to be striving for perfection. You're never going to get 100% right. But then when things go wrong and you are in front of a client and you're making a promise, you got to keep it, right? So I think that's very important for me.
Excellent. Could you share us an example or could you share us some incident at business where you saw this knowing doing gap? What do you think happened? Why did it creep in?
Well, I think there are numerous instances that happen in our business, and it could be where we are recruiting and we make a promise that I would deliver X number of profiles within 24 hours. And of course, you got to follow up with the actions that are needed to fulfill that promise that you made. And if you are not, obviously, it's going to cause a strain on the customer. So I think it's about setting the right expectations. And if you're not able to do that within 24 hours, you got to let the client know why you're not able to do it. So I think it's as simple
Hmm.
as
And what could be the cause of it? What would make a professional not follow up with a client or any other commitment he or she has made?
well, I think it starts with fanatic levels of discipline, right? So I need to know why do I exist. It's about also understanding why the client is demanding what they are demanding in 24 hours, right? So there is a need, and we are in this business because of our clients, and if you are able to kind of relate to that, and if you are able to show that fanatic levels of discipline, um, and then also organize yourself more effectively, and then really make it your KPIs. Most often, um, I think that chalta hai attitude, that is something which is prevalent. So I also see the tendency of uh, overcoming, over promising and under delivering, right? So I would rather do the reverse. I would perhaps tell the client I'll do my best to deliver in 24 hours. But I'll also set an expectation that come what may, I will deliver in 48 hours, and meet that promise. And what happens, Vivek, is when you do that consistently over a period of time, I think trust and credibility gets established, and that's when a relationship becomes even more stronger than what it is. So that's how I
Hmm.
would say the knowing doing gap is extremely important for us to address, especially in a service business.
That's such a fair statement. So, what I gathered from you is in a services industry, trust and credibility are at the core of everything.
Exactly.
And knowing doing gap kind of starts coming into this industry in a very easy way. And it can be just my chalta hai, अरे मैंने बोला है लेकिन चलो कोई बात नहीं यार एक और दिन लग गया तो क्या हो गया.
That's correct.
Correct. And
That's
what I'm
correct.
also hearing from you is the pursuit of excellence. These things become a barrier. In my pursuit of excellence, if I've committed to 24 hours, it should be 24 hours or less, not more.
Exactly.
And
That's
an
correct.
escape you have offered is, hey, make sure you make the boundaries right with your client. So, for example, if you want to say, hey, I'll get back to you in 24 hours, but it may also take 48 in case I need to do some cross reference checks or something like that. And so make sure you give yourself a certain leeway whenever
That's
you're dealing with clients. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely right. And of course, client needs are changing. They want things
Correct.
faster.
Correct.
It's also about when you're making these commitments, how are you differentiating yourself from your competition, right?
Hmm.
You cannot be too slow. At the
Hmm.
same time, you got to make realistic commitments. So I think it's quite a challenge. You got to really balance it well. But I think what really works for me is clients believe that we care for them, and then they are able to kind of keep a track of how often 9 out of 10 times Vishy has met his commitments. So it really makes them look at us as our trusted partner, and that's extremely important in a service business.
I'd completely agree with you. I love the vocabulary you're using, Vishy. And what I also find very inspiring is traditionally you've come from a very heavy engineering business units, correct? You've come essentially from the power sector. I know you were heading a business, you were MD of GE Critical Power in India, and then you went on to lead their business elsewhere.
Right.
And from there, you made a very seamless shift into a very services industry, a very people focused industry. One is staffing people, but second, it's also just serving people.
Hmm.
How was this shift for you personally?
Well, I think even if you look at my career spanning about 33 years, I worked in large companies, multinational companies like Motorola, GE, and then Lineage Park. which was again acquired by GE.
Mm.
Before I joined Randstad, and while these companies were large brands, I worked in the most toughest part of the businesses which were struggling to make money, losing cash, high attrition. So as a finance person, I had an opportunity to see how can I kind of you know influence some of the decisions, create a strategy that will transform these businesses from loss making to profit making. And I'm very fortunate that I led three such transformations across these three companies. And what I found in common, Vivek, was if you have to transform business, you have to transform people and transform people's mindsets. And that's the most important change that I was able to drive. Uh, in one of the businesses, it was all about com- companies which were acquired. So people came from different cultures. Now, how do you unify their purpose? How do you really kind of create a common goal, vision, which everybody would champion? And that just led to the business transformation because people started believing that, well, I think we can do it. Uh, Likewise, there was another business where a decision was made that this is not a business that's viable. Let's shut it down. But I created a plan whereby the business could coexist, and this in turn saved about 700 jobs, which would ideally have, had it shut down, these jobs would have been lost. So I think that's my specialty. And the reason I'm in Randstad is also because of that, because there is an opportunity to work with people. Talent is scarce today. We are 1.4 billion people in the country, but when you are looking at the right talent for the right job, it's always tough to find. So I have a very compelling purpose, about how to create livelihood for people. And then as Randstad, we put 70,000 people to work every day. And then it's, I think, about how do you bring your best next version every day at work.
Wow.
So it's about reinventing myself and keep looking at opportunities, how you can create a good, basically how you can help people to succeed. So that's one of my goals, which I'm pursuing.
Fantastic. So I am hearing from you to transform business, focus on the people first. So to
Yeah,
transform business, transform people. That's an important element. And
absolutely.
the businesses then start taking care of themselves. The second thing I keep hearing from you again and again is the daily discipline, also the
Yeah,
daily drive to become better. And
right.
that's something that you have kept with you always. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. I think I'm a big fan of Jim Collins' book called The
Hmm.
Good to Great. Uh,
Okay.
and if you look at the companies which Jim Collins did research and found them to be great companies, none of the companies are big brands. Some of the names of those companies are unheard of. But these companies had one common trait, that's the leadership. And he calls them as level 5 leaders. Uh, and these are leaders who come with a very high level of personal discipline. And the other thing he found was they had a professional will. I want to take this company towards greatness. So I think if these two factors are there in leaders, I think sky is the limit.
Sky is the limit as long as I have the right professional will and a discipline around this.
That's correct.
Um, Let me take you back, right? And I think this is an interesting bit because I
Yeah.
really like the fact that while we are a country of 1.4 billion, we are still struggling to put the right talent at the right place. And Randstad's purpose of finding livelihoods, helping people create the right kind of livelihoods is fantastic in that sense. And India is such a beautiful country to be implementing this at. Um, What are some talent challenges that you keep hearing from all your clients? And what are some ways in which they can be solved as per you?
Well, I think this is becoming more and more a talent scarce market. Even though we have 1.4 billion people ready for jobs are very limited. Uh, so I think companies need to reinvent themselves. It's no longer a corporate where dictates the terms. In my younger days, when I got a chance to interview, I mean, that was like a golden opportunity, and I was so nervous about whether I'm going to be selected or not. But today, talent decides where they want to. They look for meaningful work. They look for, is my work being valued, right? So they don't like managers who are going to be autocratic. They like managers who give them the freedom, the flexibility, and space to make their own decisions. They like companies which are innovative, drives creativity. They like companies which are diverse in their thinking. Like should be free to hire people from, say, LGBTQ communities, people who are disabled, and then women diversity. I'm very proud to say that in Randstad we have a very even 50-50 men and women in our company. And I'm a big fan of women forward, because I really believe that out of the 1.4 billion, a significant portion are women, and we don't put them in the right opportunities. Because if you have to really thrive in a talent scarce market, you need to make sure everybody is included. Youth form a very big portion of India's population. The average age in India is less than 30. It's about 28, 29. So youth come with, you have all those generations. You call them millennials, and then
Millennials.
Gen Zs, and now the Gen Alpha. They love, they don't like to be locked into a 9 to 5 job. They love the experiences in the job, which means if you are giving them legacy systems and saying, hey, do this data entry work, they are not going to like it. So you got to adapt and you got to modernize your applications, make it more simple, user friendly, no more paper. Everything should happen as a, today we are in the AI world, chat GPT, etc. So I think we got to make life exciting for them in the workplace. Then finally, I think it's about flexibility. You cannot say, come to office every day for 5 days. They are going to ask you for what, right? What is it that I can do in the office which I cannot do from home or anywhere? So I think it's also about bringing in a meaning for work from office. Office is a place where you have to collaborate, you have got to have fun. It's funny, Vivek, sometimes in olden days, I used to tell my daughters that I'm going to office to work. In these times, sometimes I say that I'm going to office to, because we are going to have a dance party, or we are going to have a game of chess. So I think things have changed dramatically post-COVID. So I think it's for companies to embrace this change, and rather than expecting talent to adapt, companies need to create policies and processes where we are able to adapt with what the talent demands, and that will be a big win for most organizations.
In a talent deficient market, it is the company that needs to adapt its way of working to the newer realities of life. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Absolutely.
I think that's a very fair point. I see this a lot as well. And whenever somebody is talking about new talent or things like that. You have employees who keep questioning it. Hey, why? And
Yeah.
I remember during my early days of job, I could never have asked my manager why. This was kind of assumed, right?
Right. Right.
If I'm a young manager who is joining, I'd like to pick your advice, Vishy, on for young, mid to mid senior, and then senior to executive transitions, right? If I'm a young manager, what would your advice to me be? If I'm a mid level manager looking at a senior level manager, what would your advice to me be? And if I'm a senior manager looking to an executive role, what would your advice to me be?
Well, young managers, obviously, I think it would be about keep learning. Um, I think it's not just what you learn in school or college. I think today, skills and competencies that are needed keep changing very rapidly. Uh, so I think it's about continue to invest in learning, because that's what is going to allow you, if you upskill yourself, you are in a position to kind of one, grow personally. And then
Hmm.
I think you need to develop people skills very early in your career. You know, I think I have seen a lot of young managers struggle with hiring people. They hire clones. They want people exactly like them. I look for, not just what that candidate brings technically, but what is his attitude? What is he going to, I mean, it's not just about a culture fit, it's also about a culture add. What does he bring into the company, which I don't have? So young managers need to be a little bit more bold in terms of hiring people of their own caliber or even better, right? When it comes to mid managers, I think a little bit about coaching style of leadership. You know, Often they feel that, okay, everybody has got a little bit of empowerment. So how do I use that power to inspire people or influence people? Most often, power is used as an authority to kind of be a little bit more authoritative. Uh, can you become more affiliated? So that's what I would say for the mid-level managers. For senior managers, I would say you need to come with a lot of personal humility. You need to show empathy and compassion, and that should come very naturally to you, because that creates a very strong bond between uh, you know where where you are versus where the other person is, and I think that connection becomes very very strong. So I think these are few things I would say. Of course, at all levels you need to be able to inspire. So I'm reminded of my former CEO, Paul Dupuy, who wrote a book called The Rule of Five, and it talks about the leadership in the modern era where a leader needs to demonstrate the 5E principles. And it starts with envisioning, where you are really talking about setting a vision for your team. And then as a leader, you also need to be able to express it in a way that everybody understands. And sometimes it's good to over communicate, because when you express once, it can mean different things for different people. So it's about putting yourself in, let's say, a HR shoe or a salesman shoe and say, what does this vision mean for each of you? So that's the express piece. The third piece is the excite piece, because I think it's important that you build excitement in the organization. People are excited about it, not really nervous or concerned. Because most often leaders say, let's say your envisioning is double or triple my revenues in 3 years. People are going to be very nervous. So, in order to be able to excite them, I think it should also be about how you create that journey, and show them what are some of the milestones which come across in the journey. Uh, and then I think it's also about Um, you know, uh, things like one cup at a time. Let's not worry about the eventual goal. What's the next foreseeable goal that we can look for? Uh, and then I think leader as an enabler, I think it's an extremely important virtue. Most often, we need to help them connect the dots. Otherwise, they're going to be struggling in terms of, okay, what's next? How do I go about it? As a leader, you don't need to tell them how to do it. You give them the problem, stay away from it, take a step back, but enable them, connect them with the right networks, or, asking questions like what if, how might we, rather than giving them, okay, this is what I expect you to do, right? So that's a great way of enabling. That way of provoking their thoughts, and then simulating the ideas. And finally, I think it's all about excellent execution, because you can do all the four E's, but if you are not executing on the plan, and goes back to my knowing doing gap, right, you're going to really not get the outcome that you want. So that's a great book, and I use that in most of my uh, projects, decisions that I take. That flow really helps in terms of getting yourself.
The power of five, correct?
That's correct. The
Excellent.
rule of
The rule of five. Thank you so much. I am going to go check this one out and get it for myself for sure.
fantastic.
Now, I think great advice. What I followed from you is when I'm a young manager, focus on learning, right? And there are two parts to learning. The first is my technical skills. Very important to get hands dirty, start doing things. And the second one is also people skills. Get used to working with a diverse set of audience and not just the kind of people I am comfortable with. As
Right.
I move to the next level, I really like be a coach versus being a manager to people.
Right.
Um, Very important to build the coaching attribute in people today to handle millennials better.
Right.
The next phase that I'm hearing from you is um, build empathy for your people, build humility in oneself because you're at a certain position and people are looking up to you. Very easy to have arrogance creep in. Most probably you'd know a lot of answers. Most probably the other people are struggling with the kind of answers that you already know. And it is at
Right.
this critical stage you've got to build in empathy
Yeah.
and be one with the people. At all stages, it's very important to be inspiring as a leader.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right. And inspiring leader, I think the rule of five is a very, very good acronym for all of us to kind of follow, wherein we get a framework to execute these things in a good way.
Right. And Vivek, I think it's very common that you will not find all the five E's in one leader, right? Uh, so I think it's also about surrounding yourself with the right people. I often, and again, Jim Collins in that book talks about um, getting the right people in the bus and getting the wrong people outside the bus. You know. And then at some stage, he said, when you get the right people in the bus, also ensure that the right people in the right seats, right? So in a technology-driven company, maybe you need your CIO or CTO to be in the right seat driving the strategy, right? In a sales-driven organization, it could be your chief sales officer. So I think it's about how do you identify who are the key people who would help you take the company to that next level. And as long as you are able to make those decisions well, I think organizations would thrive under your leadership.
The right people on the bus and the wrong people off it, and then the right people in the right chairs.
That's correct.
Make sure you surround yourself with all the right people,
Exactly.
or gaps that you may have. That helps.
That's correct. That's correct.
I really like the amount of people focus, Vishy, that you have. Um, should leaders build, after a certain stage of their careers, should leaders build a lot more people focus, or a lot more business focus?
Well, I mean, as you can see, I have a finance background and
Yes.
I have done roles in the business. So I think the first thing which leaders should shed is the thought that I'm the smartest person in the room. Uh, you got to be able to accept that there are people who are much smarter than you. They know the answers more than what you know. As a leader, you need to learn the art of asking the right questions. And as long as you're doing that, I think people would admire you for who you are and how you lead the team. You know, so I believe that you need a little bit of industry knowledge. I mean, as a leader, I said learning at the early stage managers, but to me, I think today learning is becoming an important trait for everybody, not just the first level managers, but also I learn things every day. So I go through, sometimes sit in the classroom. But I think the most important trait, if you are not a technical person, if you are not from the business, is how do you make yourself aware of what the lowest person in the company is doing, right? For example, what I do is sometimes I roll up my sleeve, go and sit with a consultant who is recruiting, and I say, hey, how many mandates did you receive today? How are you sourcing these CVs? So show me, how do you make a recruitment? How do you source? How do you screen candidates? Can I sit through this interview just as a spectator, just to see how you are asking the question? So I think it's about I need to experience the day in the life of a consultant, and the more often I do, I learn a lot. And sometimes I also use what I learn to also clarify some of the things which I didn't know. It could be, how can I use AI to do sourcing, for example, which is something which I'm not familiar. But at the same time, I'm also able to give them feedback about, I thought it would have been most relevant if you had asked this question in the interview rather than what you asked. So I think it works both ways. We learn together, and it creates a lot of, you know, we sync up in our thought process, and I think it makes learning fun.
So shed the suit, roll up the sleeves, get close to the lowest denominator that you have in the organization, see exactly what they are doing and how is value being added to the customer. And
Right.
that allows us to learn a lot more, get our hands dirty, inspire people in the truest way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Fantastic lessons, these ones, Vishy. Thank you so much for sharing. You come from a staffing industry, and I have a very specific question for you.
Yeah.
Um, and I get this question quite a bit, so I want to ask you. Um, we hire for skill sets, right? We hire people as a CFO, you've got to have these things, or as a manager of finance, these things. But very often we see people failing when it comes to the right attitude or the right aptitude towards work, which is what you said, professional will is as
Mm,
important, right?
mm,
When you are
mm,
hiring for yourself, right? When you are
mm,
hiring for your team, how do you
mm.
identify skills? How do you identify some professional will in the individuals?
Well, I think it's about listening to their life story and experiences. I think tell me about couple of areas, couple of times when you have failed, and how have you overcome those failures. It tells me about uh, dealing with adversity. I also look for curiosity in people. Tell me about something where you've worked in an unknown project, a thing that you did not know anything about, and you were asked to do it. How did you go through it? I really look for, resilience, failures, and how they overcame those failures. That really helps me, uh, look for, okay, this person has really tried and tested. Often we look for successes, and people talk about it a lot when they interview, because it's all about their own glorifying their profile, right?
Hmm.
But I do the reverse. I ask them about where things have been challenging, where they did not achieve a KPI. So I was interviewing to a sales guy, and he said, I've been an overachiever throughout my career. 10 years in the industry, every year I achieved 150% of my budget. Right? Um, and I asked him, can you tell me one instance where you think you have failed or you could have done better? He said, frankly, I can't recollect. I didn't hire him. Uh, right. So I think it's important that you fail, but you fail fast and learn from those mistakes. And I wouldn't believe somebody who is not failed. It could be failure I face every day, right? And I think the most important thing for me is those 15, 20 minutes end of the day where I spend time on self-reflection. I play the whole day, how it went through. Did I do well in this meeting? Did I do what I'm supposed to do in this town hall which I had? Did I convey the right messages? So it helps me a lot of time that, oh, I could have done this better. And for me, that's the failure, right? So, uh, and that requires a lot of self-awareness, and a little bit of emotional intelligence. Uh, it should not be so much that you become a self-critic. It's good to be a self-critic, but I also live with the fact that, nobody is perfect. Nothing is perfect, 100% perfect. So we all strive for perfection, and as long as you have done your best, I think it's okay.
Fantastic. So you listen, and you listen very specifically for failures, resilience, curiosity. And what I really love to hear was how you are very comfortable with people failing. So you don't like the brash people coming over, no, no, I've never done anything which has failed in my entire life, because there's something not quite right there. So that is
Yeah.
one thing that I loved hearing from you, and that is good. The second thing that I am taking away personally is the reflection that you do during the entire day of your day. So you would just sit down and just see, okay, what did I do great? What can I do better? Could I have done this better in that meeting? And that allows you to keep improving as a professional. Is that right?
No, absolutely. And Vivek, I think I must mention this. I
Mhm.
learn a lot from sports. Um,
You learn a lot from sports.
yeah. So if you ask Virat Kohli, tell me about your failures, I'm sure he's going to say that, uh, you know, he's going to acknowledge that he has failed multiple times, right?
For
But
sure.
he continues to be a superstar and a champion player for the country, right? And then when he's lost a match and he's in the post-match commentary box, people are interviewing him, asking him about the match that went by. I think most often he's going to talk about. He is not going to blame anybody in the team. He's going to be reflecting on some of the things which could have done well, my bowlers or my batsmen. He's not going to really pinpoint and name people, make them victims. Most often, managers make people victims, and that breaks the relationship, breaks trust. So I think it's also important when people fail. Uh, you could do a one-on-one, be very direct, and tell them, okay, this is what I thought you could have done better, or this is what you did not do. Be tough in private, but in a public forum, you got to be really playing it a little bit safe, and make sure that while you direct the message at the group, you're not really making people victims.
So managers need to avoid making people victims, right? You
Right.
can't blame people or kind of make a person accountable. You've got to get into an issue and resolve an issue, but
Right.
don't make people victims or don't make them scapegoats or whatever issue has happened and try to pass it off on them. What
Right.
I'm also hearing from you, and please correct me, Vishy, if I'm not right, is in the current times, it is very important to start making things real. So, for example, managers need to be comfortable with the fact that people who are speaking about their failures are actually speaking the truth,
Yeah.
you know, or they
Yeah.
are trying to become better.
Right.
Versus if a person comes in and he tries to fake power, he tries to fake being who he is, which is by saying I've never failed. Actually, he's not a right guy. Right.
No, I agree. I think it's all about authenticity and when you're speaking, I think you're going to speak about what actually happened and I mean sometimes you cannot fake these up, right? It has to come from you.
Hmm. And organizations also need to move towards being real. So, for example, the leadership really needs to ask itself, hey, if you're asking people to come to work in the office, what's the core reason behind it? Do they really need to come, or is it just an artificial security we want to create? Now, there could be some genuine reasons. For example, sharing of information. Information needs to be in servers in certain defined areas only. And for that, you need to come. And that's a
Yeah,
mandatory part. But does everybody need to come? Who needs to come? Why? And how do we make sure that the reason for our existence is felt with everybody deep within their own DNA, such
right.
that they know that as an organization, our need to exist is real.
I agree. I think there are industries where for example, if I look at an airline industry, you cannot work from home. You need the crew to be in the aircraft.
Correct.
Manufacturing lines, I think the production lines are heavily workmen dependent. So you got to have there is no much flexibility in those industries. But if work can be done in a very meaningful way, if people can still achieve the outcomes that you expect without coming to office, I think should be respected. And today, Vivek, with technology, I think we can even get some of those things which you mentioned, get things in the cloud. So companies can invest in technology which makes work from anywhere feasible. Because I think work is borderless today. I see a lot of clients who we support sitting in US and sitting in Europe out of India. So we have an offshore development center where we can provide seats, we can provide computers, security cameras, everything. So work can be done from anywhere. And with modern technology, you can even monitor how much screen time, what productivity they are delivering. So so maybe I think it's a little bit more broad-based thought process. We also need to see no one size fits all. There may be large organizations which have very different complexities, client-driven processes. So I think we have to be a little bit more careful in terms of where it would work, where it would not.
It's a very fair statement. Vishy, thank you for your time. I think very insightful, um, very experienced based, and very real as a conversation. As we wrap up our conversation, any advice that you'd like to give to the audience?
Well, I would say it started with your first question about anger management, right? So I would say control your anger before it controls you, And I think the second advice I would give is be kind to yourself. There is a lot happening out there, and sometimes you get into this trap of I want to outperform. I want to be successful both in my personal and professional life. Sometimes I think it's about pushing pause, taking a deep breath, enjoying yourself, and being thankful for where you are, what you have done, what you have achieved. And that would give a lot of personal gratification and happiness.
I would agree. Thank you so much for sharing this, and more power to you and the work that your organization does.
Oh, you're welcome. Amazing talking to you, Vivek.